Today we shall try to discuss the dynamics and power of devotion. It's a very beautiful topic chosen by our dear Brahma Pranaji. And all of you have come. See, all these discussions, yesterday also we said, now again and again in the next session also we'll be talking very much about that, because all these things are meaningful, are worthwhile only for those who have a different orientation or different attitude towards life. If you are busy only and only with existential life, these things really do not mean much to such people. But the problem is, the world is full of problems, difficulties. Anyone, irrespective of age, irrespective of stature in society, whether wealthy or poor, or old or young, or man or woman, anyone, each individual, whether you live in the house or in the monastery or in the streets, anywhere, all of us have numerous problems. So, how to solve it? What's the way of attending to these issues? How to find a solution? Of course, different great personalities have appeared in different parts of the world, have suggested different solutions. But Hinduism, which is one of the most ancient paths to reality discovered in this world, there, time and again, extraordinary souls have appeared and they have suggested true and lasting solutions to all these problems. So, the two ways which have been largely suggested according to Hinduism, they are the path of knowledge or jnana, or the path of bhakti or devotion, depending upon one's temperament, one's predilections, one's nature, etc. But essentially, what is it that distinguishes these paths? The path of jnana or knowledge it's a largely or it's completely a subjective inquiry, dealing with the subjective aspect of reality. Whereas the path of bhakti is related to the objective aspect of reality, considering the path to deal with an objective personality or image or form, etc. In the path of jnana, there is no form, it's formless. Whereas in the path of bhakti, there is a personality, and then there is a form, and that is how it is largely practiced. In the path of jnana, it's always self-effort, because it doesn't believe in any external object, in any external personality, in an external power, etc. So it's always the self-effort is what is again and again stressed. The path of bhakti also, one has to certainly make an effort, but the path of bhakti clearly says that it is through divine grace or the grace of God that you get the ultimate vision, ultimate experience, solutions to problems. For everything, they say it is largely because of the grace of God. So in the path of jnana, it's always it is I, that relationship, whereas in the bhakti, it is I, thou, me and my God, me and my Ishta, me and my object of worship. So these are essentially the two major paths which are adopted according to the Hindu religion to reach the ultimate goal of life, to experience reality, to find solutions to all problems of life, not only the existential problems, even going beyond them. So you see, is in the path of bhakti, one tries to develop a dependence on a higher reality or a higher power, and thereby, by surrendering oneself to such a power or such a reality, we are trying to seek a solution. Actually, if you go deeper, if you understand, analyze, everything is ultimately, one can say, it comes from within itself. Only thing is, for the sake of convenience, one posits an external entity or a god or an Ishtadevata. Because, in the path of jnana, on the path of knowledge, is absolutely, you are left with no support whatsoever. You can't depend on anything. You have to deny everything. You have to stand completely on your own, totally depending upon oneself. And that is really difficult for 99.99% of the aspirants. Because we always try to seek some support. Here, there, everywhere. Whenever we are in difficulty, whenever we are in danger, whenever we are in doubt, whenever we are assailed by anything, we immediately run to X, Y, Z, this, that, anything. That is our human nature. We always believe that someone else might solve the problems for us. Someone else might suggest something. Someone else will be our advisor. He would help us, and so on and so forth. That's why for majority of the people, the path of bhakti, it really, gives you a scope by positing an external entity, developing a faith or a shraddha or a dependence on a god or your chosen ideal or Ishta Devata, and through that you try to progress. Swami also gives a very beautiful example. So you can consider that, because these two paths are not really contradictory in that sense. Ultimately, that's why Swami always says, as many faiths, so many paths, and all reach the same ultimate reality at the end. You might say that on one hand, you say it's absolutely formless, there is no form, there is no external entity, there is no object. Here you completely objectify, you are positing an entity and all that. How do these things lead to the same? Ramakrishna used to give a beautiful example. Supposing your foot has been pricked by a thorn, you take a sharp object, remove the thorn, and throw both of them away. So like that, for those who cannot directly go to that non-dual idea of reality, or the formless aspect of reality, they posit a form as a kind of intermediary. And at one stage of evolution, it's possible that one might not need any external assistance or form or objective at all, and one can straight away at that time go into that. That is why Sri Ramakrishna clearly says, even if you want Brahma Jnana, even if you want the highest non-dual experience, if you have a powerful reliance, dependence, spirit of surrender to your God, that God himself or herself would arrange even for that. He goes that far. In one of the most wonderful lives of Sri Ramakrishna, written by his disciple, Swami Saradananda, clearly discusses elaborately where does this bhakti and jnana really merge. Because in jnana, what we try to do, we try to negate everything, negate. We will not go much into details, just only the introduction. We negate. Ultimately, what remains is that ultimate truth, or oneness, or consciousness, or Brahman, or Atman, or whatever you might name it. In bhakti, what happens? You keep on positing a Ishtadevata, the concept of your chosen ideal. Keep on worshipping, keep on praying, keep on doing all that. You go so near. At one point of time, you are completely erased. And what remains is only the chosen ideal or Ishtadevata. That is also another form of Advaita. In one case, they call it as Brahman or Atman or something. Here we call it only as Ishtadevata. Because the devotee sort of completely self-effaces himself or herself to such an extent, no trace of I or the individuality is left, and only the supreme God or the chosen ideal, Arishta, that finally stays. So that's also, in a sense, you can call, that's also a kind of Advaita or an ultimate idea of oneness. So ultimately, all these are all for discussions in a far, far advanced stage of spiritual evolution. Initially, what is the kind of support that would help us? Because now all of us, the entire humanity, constantly seeks support, help to solve their problems, difficulties, innumerable issues. What is the kind of support one might seek? And this bhakti or devotion is a very potent method, a very effective method of handling it, thereby, because we all love to be, under the care of someone who really takes care of us, someone who take care of all our problems, all our burdens, all our difficulties. How nice it would be, for all of us. That's why we all seek mentors, guides, gurus, teachers. What is the idea? We go and completely open ourselves up to such a personality, and thereby we feel greatly comforted. We feel that such a person would show us the path, guide us, help us get over difficulties, problems, and so on. That is how we go. So this is a very beautiful way, the path of bhakti or devotion, where there is a huge scope for this idea, this attitude of seeking help, a spiritual help for all our problems. So how does this really operate? What are the dynamics of this discipline called bhakti or the yoga of devotion? So, this is idea of realizing the ultimate, getting over all our existential and other problems. Of course, one doesn't stop there. Initially, with all our difficulties, etc., one begins the journey there. But then as one progresses, slowly one understands very clearly, one should not stop, one should go further. Then only the spiritual idea, spiritual values, spiritual evolution takes dominance, completely dominates our life. Then only we give up our pursuit of excellence or goods and other things in the existential life and go beyond and try to reach the supreme. So normally they say there are three ways, three steps in this path of devotion. First is prayer or prarthana, something which is very famous even in Christian tradition, in many other traditions. And then worship, and ultimately dhyana. So these are all, can say, stages. So in prayer, these are actually successive steps, you might say. In prayer, the aspirant completely opens his heart towards his chosen ideal or ishta, etc. And then he tries to seek the solution. Now, why this is the first step? Why this is so important? Quite often, it always very attractive to speak of dhyana, remaining deeply absorbed in meditation and all that. Of course, we'll deal with it elaborately in the next session. But unless you clear the decks, unless you are through the initial stages, it's like someone trying to register for doctorate without doing graduation, post-graduation, etc. So that's why people all their life, they try to close their eyes and they think that they are meditating, but nothing is really happening. Only the clock is ticking, they come back the same way. But in prarthana, what happens? It's possible to clearly establish lines of communication with the divine, with your chosen ideal, with your God. In fact, there are wonderful ways of doing this. That is why, as an initial step, it is extremely powerful and extremely useful. Actually, when we open our hearts to the divine, there is a communication from God to the soul. Because initially, we have no idea. We are just groping in the dark. But then as we start this discipline of prayer, which is the first step in this three-step discipline called bhakti or bhakti yoga, the first step, when we start praying, maybe initially even for the existential needs to start with, slowly we understand how one has to pray for even something higher, because ultimately, our dependence on God, our dependence on any philosophy, any idea, any system, any religion, the existential problems would never get solved completely. We must understand very clearly. People think that they come to see the same temple. People come in India, there's a very famous tradition where they go and break coconuts. It's a very famous tradition in India in the temples. Or offering as bali or sacrificial goats and things like that. They go to this very famous temple in Kali Ghat, Kali temple. There is it's a very characterized a football crazy city. So there are two famous clubs. So the devotees of both clubs for the same match and offer any number of goats to deity. Which one should accept? So, ultimately either one is going to win or the other is going to lose or there's going to be a draw. So somebody's prayer is not succeeding. So the existential problems, we should never accept that just by you go and pray something or put some coins or money or notes or whatever it is in the box or offer some sweets or something like that, God cannot be purchased. And problems would never end that way. Actually, the deeper you delve into all that, slowly you realize the utter futility of trying to solve the existential problems it will. And slowly you also understand the utter meaninglessness of this earthly existence. The more and more you understand, you are able to very beautifully and in a very smooth fashion bypass these issues and go to something much deeper. Exactly, it's like a bypass surgery. In bypass, the blocks are not removed. The blocks would be there. But then, a connection is established somewhere else, whereby the flow of blood is beautiful. And these blocks no longer hinder the flow of blood. So similarly, these existential things would continue to exist. Overnight, your finances would not improve, your losses would not become profits, your health will not suddenly, your diabetic, blood pressure, all those things would vanish overnight. No, they would all continue to be. But then if these things do not bother you at all, what does it matter? If you have a cholesterol or you don't have a cholesterol, as long as it doesn't bother you. The body has to go one day or other. So when you advance in this path, then all of us, when you go forward, slowly we understand through all that, we develop that state of mind, the right kind of attitude, where we understand all these are all ephemeral, all these are all impermanent, meant to vanish one day or other. So can we seek something higher? Can we seek something permanent? Can we seek something everlasting? That search would really lead you further and further. That is why, we start with prayer. Prayer, what happens? When, it's like, I often say that when you try to pray to God, one might say, I don't know. How do you pray to a person whom I don't know? And I would always say that, I don't know what's the system here in India, when you apply for a job, you straight away, nowadays it's all become online. I am talking about 50 years back, how things used to happen when I was applying for a job or things like that. You directly write to the highest chairman of the company, Sri Ratan Tata, so and so, I am so and so. I would do my best. I will serve you to the best. Please select me, give, as if we know him personally. We never think that we don't know when we apply. In the same way, to God also we can apply. We can do it, although we might not know. So that is how it is possible to establish communication lines between oneself and God, oneself and a superior power, oneself and one's Ishtadevata or object of worship. Of course, quite often, our traditions, what we had learned knowingly or unknowingly when we were young, in our childhood, in our younger days, all that quite often, we might have participated. That's why, in ancient India, it was always the tradition. Swami, you can say, whatever I am today, it's because of my mother, because she told me wonderful things from the Ramayana and Mahabharata and such epics and Puranas and so on. So if you get all that in tradition in the house, suddenly all that become living, meaningful, important, because when the crisis strikes us and we are in difficulty, that's the time we understand the value of all that. So in this, what happens in the prayer is soul opening itself to God. The communication is from God to soul. So, but then what happens in worship is the next step. Worship is actually offering something to God. It can be something physical, it can be items of worship or this or that. It can even be one's body and mind. Anything can be offered ultimately. Again, as we go deeper, as we advance, we find that it's not even so much the item, because in Gita, Bhagavan clearly says, Patram Pushpam Phalam Toyim Yomi Bhaktya Prechati. It can be leaf, it can be flower, it can be fruit, it can be anything, it can even be water. But what is necessary is devotion and the faith and the Shraddha with which it is offered. So that's what, because this was extremely extremely prevalent, very much prevalent, very much in vogue in the Vedic times, where they used to do what is called this yajna. Very famous idea, Gita is discussed elaborately. Yajna is actually a form of worship, where you worship the various gods, the idea of offering into the fire in a representative way in response to all that we gather from Prakriti, all that we take from the nature and all that. So this is very famous, but subsequently this idea of yajna slowly was given up, and because nowadays, because of the change of lifestyle or whatever it is, so it has become, completely, it's getting relegated to the secondary place, etc. Not much of it, unless someone organizes at a community level and all that. Previously, every house they used to do this kind of yajnas. Now that's not so much there. So from prayer to worship, at that level, you offer, and thereby you are opening up the other line of things. It's from you to God this way. In prayer, it was God to you. In worship, it is from yourself to God to some extent. Then finally, when it matures, when it becomes the third stage, namely meditation, dhyana. The another word used for dhyana is upasana in our tradition. Upasana means sitting near God. When the worship becomes deepening, when it becomes more and more intimate, when you really progress further, slowly it can become into what is called dhyana or upasana, where you reach very near God. So the idea is, with all this is how we are to practice from prayer to worship to upasana or dhyana. Because if one is very diligent and very deep in his prayer itself can slowly, ultimately merge into that kind of a dhyana or upasana, even bypassing the stage of worship. And what happens in prayer, as you pray more and more intensely, at one point of time, the aspirant completely gives himself totally unto God, virtually keeping nothing for oneself, completely erasing one's kind of personality. So at that point of time, it becomes a mental offering of oneself completely to God. So the upasana or the worship part, that part also is kind of taken care of, and then one merges kind of into dhyana. It is possible. So this is a very important idea. Actually, in the Sermon on the Mount, when Christ talks of asking, seeking, and knocking at the door, asking, seeking, and knocking at the door, probably he talks of these things, namely prayer, worship, and dhyana or upasana. So there are the prayer. In the most important thing in prayer, how this can become really effective as a tool, as a spiritual discipline in the path of devotion, is by trying to develop a particular relationship with God. First of all, as I clearly said at the beginning, the need to have a spiritual orientation for life is very important. Then, if you really go back, scratch ourselves, try to revisit our past and so on, slowly we discover that in our childhood, we were introduced to some tradition in our home or in our in other environment, Or slowly, as we grow older, we pick up with somewhere, we come to Vedanta Society, we come to Ramakrishna Center, we come somewhere else. Then we pick up the idea of this Ishta Devata, the chosen ideal, and then we start. So, if it is to be really powerful, if it is to be really meaningful, then what is called is at the time one has to establish a kind of relationship. That's why in the Bhakti schools there are so many important ideas whereby you can cultivate this kind of relationship. It can be the idea of being a dasya, being the servant of the God, and then it can be a sakha, it can be a friend of the God, and even the idea of the madhura bhava, even bridal mysticism, that kind of relationship is also possible. So the idea is to establish some kind of a real relationship with God. Thereby, your worship, your prarthana, and going further, your worship becomes really meaningful and quite real. Because whatever we do, unless there is a sense of reality is there, we don't feel really up to it. We don't feel like getting really involved. We feel it is becoming mechanical. So there is no strength in it, there is no depth in it. So, but if we establish some kind of a relationship as father, as mother, as son, as daughter, as child, can be any such relationship, then that really gives a beautiful sense of reality to our practice of prayer, and that is how it can really take us forward. Even in prayer, there are probably two types of prayer. One is completely external, where we stand before the deity in a temple or in our own shrine room. You stand or sit with open eyes, you pray. You pour your heart out in prayer. That's one type. There's another, the interior type is where there's all those external aids are not there. Anywhere you are, you close your eyes and deep within in your heart, you imagine the living form or living figure of your chosen ideal or Ishta Devata, and thereby that way you can offer your prayers. So there are two really ways of praying, external and interior prayers. So actually, sometimes people think that praying is like, why should I be like a beggar? Why should I beg of God? Why should I do all that? It's not really begging, because see, when a child asks his mother for something, does the mother think that child is begging, or does the child think so? God is our own. He is the most intimate and the dearest dear to us. So when someone is so dear and near, where else shall we go except him? Supposing God is like a supreme guardian, the ultimate. So obviously, it's not the kind of weakness or anything, but it's really going to someone, approaching someone whom we consider as very dear and very near to us. So essentially, actually, prayer is the first stage in spiritual aspiration, aspiring to realize the ultimate, aspiring to realize the ultimate truth and so on. So it's, in a way, you can say that it's the beginning stage, and one might often say that because everyone wants to only meditate lastly, but this is like going to the kindergarten. But unless you pass through the kindergarten and primary school and all that, you can't go to high school or a college, etc. So this kindergarten is extremely, is very important. So Sri Ramakrishna always used to say, the individual souls can be really connected, or it can be linked to the Supreme Soul, namely God. He would always give the idea. In those days also it was there perhaps. He says, there's a gas company, there are connections in every house. The moment you apply to the gas company, he gives connection and the gas flows to all the houses from the same storage, from the same gas storage. The same way, God is like a supreme power or supreme this thing. So by praying that way, it really helps you link up to God, and thereby you hope to solve all the problems. What happens, in prayer, it gives you a tremendous sense of security. Because you feel that here is a person who would not desert me, who would not give me up under any circumstances. So with that kind of certainty, when you approach life, you find that you develop quite often, ultimately, ultimately one has to solve all problems oneself. So what you really need is a tremendous mental strength and the resilience and the capacity to bear and forbear and go through all that. So when you always feel that, yes, here is a support for me, here is my strength, then you are able to go through all that, withstand many of these difficulties, problems, etc. And that is the real power of prayer. So it gives you a sense of security. It detaches the will from desires and objects, and it gives a higher direction to thoughts. Because quite often we are besieged by innumerable desires. The mind goes in 1,000 directions. Our thoughts are like that. By praying, because it is done so consciously, what happens in dhyana, when the moment we sit, we try to close our eyes and try to become completely into an unconscious world, and we often end up sleeping or completely getting distracted. Because in prayer, quite often, it is done very consciously and deliberately, that, it helps us to detach your minds from desires and objects of attraction, etc. And, it gives a higher direction to our thoughts. It keeps the mind alert. It actually clears the way, clears the path for the inflow of divine grace or the divine help for us. So all these are all possible in this prayer. And then ultimately, as I also said, if the prayer is of such a quality, it is possible that prayer itself might merge into dhyana, and where one might not even go into the stage called worship, because part of that is also being done at a very advanced stage. Otherwise, normally there are these three stages. So, in this upasana, before that comes worship, where we always offer something to God. A few words about this worship also, which is the second stage. The third stage, dhyana, we will take up in the next session. So what happens? So this, we are supposed to offer to God. It can be material things. Ultimately, it can also be our own body, our mind, etc. The Bhagavata Purana talks of 9 kinds of bhakti, which is essentially probably 9 kinds of offerings. It says, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atmanivedanam. So hearing about God, singing about His glories, and all that. And finally, it says, complete surrender, Atmanivedanam. Give yourself totally unto God. That is the final act of your worship or prayer, or your participating that way. That is the ultimate idea in that. And then, actually, in this, through prayer, what is really important is one must have very strong faith, deep faith in the ultimate, in the personality or in the God to whom we are trying to pray. Because that's very, very necessary. Without that, quite often, why we find that we are not able to find solace, not able to find the kind of peace that we are seeking. That's because basically that faith is not there. So is it possible to start only after having complete faith? Then we which is first, whether the chicken or the egg. So we should start as we pray, as we do, probably our faith also would increase, and the power or the intensity of the prayer, that would also increase. So that's possible. And then in this, a kind of, there should be a great intensity and continuity. That's why the Christianity talks of unceasing prayer. It may not be always one, wherever one might be, always carrying that kind of a prayerful idea in the mind, always being that way. That greatly helps. And also, a kind of completely feeling oneself helpless before God. not helpless with regard to worldly things and existential things, completely surrendering oneself. Accept, how does that helplessness come? When you understand the mightiness of God, the Mahatmya, and the God of your chosen ideal is so extraordinary, so great, so immense, so powerful. You feel like a helpless child surrendering before such a God. That is what gives you a great sense of the authenticity. See, whatever we do should be very authentic. Then only you have that authenticity in the prayers that we do. So again, briefly about this sacrifice, worship. Worship has probably, again, there are at least three major kind of components. One is that it has to be the sacredness of worship, how sacred it is. Because you know, there is a very famous saying, Sanskrit says, Devo Bhutva Devam Vijit. You become Devata yourself and then worship God. Because no, otherwise, how can you, quite often the question, with all our impurities, with all our deficiencies, shortcomings, how can we worship God, who is so powerful, so pure, so glorious, so extraordinary, so of the nature of light, of the nature of supreme power and all that. So that is why in very wonderful traditions of worship, you sit and you purify yourself. There are various ways, mantras and rituals, etc., that are performed to purify oneself. And through that, one becomes really fit for worshipping the Supreme, worshipping the highest God. And that is how you yourself become a Devata, or a divine personality, or a divine being, and then you really worship the divine. It seems in the Benares, somebody was doing, one monk or brahmachari was doing Kali Puja. There are so many items of worship, so many rituals called nyasas, for touching the various parts of the body, so that, through all that, each part becomes kind of divine. And ultimately, the whole personality becomes kind of divine personality. And that's why, how can you worship a powerful deity like Kali? Swami Brahmanji was sitting and watching. He clearly saw that the moment the limb was touched, the Devata, see, all the body, see, imagine how sacred is our body. Each limb has an Adhishtatri Devata, or a presiding deity. Our hands, our feet, our fingers, our mouth, everything. The whole, there is a huge amount of, idea behind all that. So he literally saw the presiding deity becoming alive and shining. So the idea is one has to purify oneself, and then one has to do that. There is this sacredness associated with that. And then, there is this sanctity. All the items for the offering, puja, extra, have to be sanctified, have to be purified. And then, finally, it also becomes when you offer that way, it is there's a sacrifice involved in any worship. The sacredness, sanctity, and sacrifice. Because, unless you're, of course it's a sacrifice. Sacrificing material things. In fact, people are saying, why you are offering such costly things into the fire? They are very costly Benares saris, many other things are given as oblation. So the sacrifice, and finally, a tremendous amount of self-sacrifice is also involved. That is the idea of yajna which was propagated in the Gita. He says, we must constantly remember that we are drawing so much from nature, from the world. Every moment of our existence is dependent on so many people. So unless we acknowledge that and readily sacrifice something, we will be living the lives of thieves. That's what the Gita says. It clearly, stene eva, humte stene eva, like thieves will be living. That's what the Gita says. So this is briefly about the dynamics of the idea of worship, of bhakti, where we talked about prayers as well as worship. Of course, we'll talk about dhyana in the next session. But then, the power How does it work? Have we seen? Has it been proved successful? So we'll see some of those ideas. First of all, one of the greatest exponent of prayer was Sri Ramakrishna himself. Although this was Vedic prayers, etc., very popular, slowly over the years, even if you see in many other devotional texts, bhakti scriptures, etc., this idea of prayer, the way it was emphasized, practiced by Sri Ramakrishna, you might not find. So Sri Ramakrishna has virtually added a beautiful new dimension to the idea of bhakti itself by really showing by his life how through prayer one can reach the highest goal of spiritual life. So if you see the initial sadhana of Sri Ramakrishna, it was largely, it consisted of unending prayer, day and night, praying to mother, praying to mother, praying to mother, like an absolutely helpless child, continuous prayer, hour after. Of course, he did dhyana, he did other things also. But the real strength, the foundation, the bedrock on which his sadhana was resting was his idea of prayer. He was praying intensely, like absolutely, not when this Ramakrishna really teaches us how to pray. He says, I do not know anything. I am a totally helpless child of yours. I don't have knowledge. I don't have bhakti. I don't have vairagya. I don't have all that. I just only Amitama Sharanagata. I have completely surrendered to you. I have nothing else. Please show me the way. Please help me. That's why he was praying intensely till he got his first experience. Is where when he had the real first time, he was praying intensely for so many years without sleep, without food. He would roll on the floor, on the mud, roads, saying that one more day has gone. Still you have not shown yourself to me. And you would say, oh, that is, he must be extremely having some severe stomach trouble or something. That's why he's like that. But then, ultimately, when nothing was happening, finally he took the khadga or the sword which was there in the temple. He said, let me put an end to this life, which is useless because I have not had your vision. Then he had the first vision. That's, of course, a lot can be talked about that. That was his first major spiritual experience. The major breakthrough of Sri Ramakrishna was largely through this idea of intense prayer, praying to Mother God. So, afterwards, because he had that, any other thing he could just do in 3 days. So many people came to teach him. So many acharyas came. Bhairavi Brahmani came. Totabri came. Then Jatadhari came. So many came. But he absolutely could simply swim through every current because he was so established in this idea of prayer. He knew how to connect to the Supreme. He knew how to connect to any new idea. He knew how to approach any new spiritual path. It was always, this was so, and then every other discipline he practiced according to what was prescribed. Whatever was prescribed in Tantras, he did. Whatever he prescribed in the Vaishnava scriptures, he did. He did all that. Even he practiced Christianity, Islam, everything. But essentially, the real strength of Sri Ramakrishna, the power was through devotion, where he reached the highest pinnacle of spiritual experience. And not only that, that is what stood him throughout his life. Subsequently, he might even to do Vedanta sadhana. He said, when Totabri said, you are the most fitting aspirant that I've ever come across, I will teach you Vedanta. He said, no, I have to ask my mother. He went to Mother Kali, took her permission. And yes, mother has given permission. Then he did Vedanta. For him, mother was absolute living entity. Even doing sadhana was also like that. He would feel, he would keep his hand near the nose of mother and he would feel the mother breathing. So, for him, it was always a living experience. And after he was established, it was a continuous, unending, living contact, living experience was what he had with the mother. For anything, he would go to her. Narendranath, he knew Narendranath was a very brilliant person, a great rationalist, given to reasoning and all that. Narendranath says, Naren says, Naren is so educated. Is mother fooling me? He would go to mother. Say, no, my mother has told me. And say, no, Narendranath, Keshav Chandra Sen and Vijay Krishna Goswami were sitting together. And now it's early 18, 19 years. By the time Keshav Chandra Sen was a world famous figure, he was known all over the world. He was such a brilliant orator. He had established his Brahma Samaj and all that. So Sri Ramakrishna looked at all of them. And after Vijay Krishna Goswami and Keshav Chandra Sen left, he said, you see, the reason, the qualities for which Keshav Sen is so famous, Narendranath has 18 such qualities. Narendranath was furious. Are you mad? You are saying Keshav Sen is such a world famous figure. I'm a mere boy. You are comparing me to him and saying I have 18 such qualities. People will call you mad. Oh, is it so? Simply went to mother, went to the temple. Mother, and he is saying like that. He came back. You rascal, I won't believe you. Mother has told me what I say is correct. Exactly. Where is Keshav Chandra? No one knows. I think many of you have not even heard of it. But Narendranath is known all over the world. So this thing, this devotion is path of bhakti and essentially prayer-based. That's how we started. That's what has stood Sri Ramakrishna in such a great help. Is the only approach to the reality for anything, any problems, any difficulties, anytime. Towards the end of his life, he was not able to take anything at all. It completely stopped taking solid food. A little, some rice porridge or something is what that pious, what they call it, suchi pious, was all he was taking maybe. Then he said, no, you must go and tell your mother, you are so close, she will make you eat. Go. And naturally, as a child, he went and he came back. You fools, you made me ask like this. I'm ashamed. Mother told me, are you not eating through so many mouths? Why should you eat like this? You fools, all of you made me go and ask. I'm ashamed. That was his kind of relationship. So, you might say, Sri Ramakrishna was so extraordinary. He was so different. How can we do like that? How can we? So I will give you probably one life story I might share. There will not be more time for that. I think we have to go on to question answers, is not in about 10 minutes time. So let me tell you, there was, of course they are still living. This gentleman was a very big executive in some company. He was director in several other companies. He and his wife, and they had a son. Son was a very brilliant chemical engineer. A year before, this son first started going to Chennai. And he only introduced them to the then President Maharaj of the order, Swami. So within 1 year, this boy got a very big post abroad, job. He was to leave after a few days. Then suddenly he developed some discomfort, some fever or something. They took him to the doctor. He gave medicine for 1 or 2 days. Nothing was happening. Then he said, no, please admit him to the hospital. He admitted him. After a couple of days, they transferred him to ICU. Then after 5-6 days, he died. He died of malignant malaria. So they were completely shattered. The world was gone totally. What is there for? Nothing. They were their only child. And they were completely smashed, you can say. This boy himself had introduced them to Mutt, and they went. And met Swami Ramanathananji. He gave them so much time and told them, consoled them, gave them initiation. That is how they were introduced to Sri Ramakrishna, Mother, and Swamiji. It's more than probably 30 years. Both of them are in ripe old age, into their maybe 84, 85 or something like that. I do talk to them once in a while. The moment you telephone to them, they only talk about Sri Ramakrishna or Holy Mother. Not a word of regret about what had happened, how their only son was snatched away, and how their world was shattered. The power of devotion. The devotion to Sri Ramakrishna, Mother, and Swamiji completely transformed their lives. This person was a very brilliant person. So he gave up all this directorship, that. So they have purchased a small house in the outskirts of Chennai. They are living there. This person continuously holds classes. and Gita or something for a group of people in that area. This lady, she teaches slokas, this, that for a group of children. That's how they have been living for so many years. Never do they ever tell me. I think within 2-3 years, that was the first time I met them. I was at Belur Math. I gave them a lot of time. They were very happy to talk to me. And we have been in touch. Never have they ever said in all these 25 years or so, I know them, oh Maharaj, why it happened? Why our son was taken away from us? We are so dharmic. We are doing why it is. Never. Always they will talk about Thakur, Mahan Swamiji, the latest book that has come, what Hari Maharaj says, what Raja Maharaj says, what they heard in my YouTube talk, how we discussed, how nothing else. Just like ripe fruit, ready to fall anytime, just waiting, welcoming for the ultimate call. I think if someone can do that, it's really worth practicing this discipline called devotion, which can really take us quite far. See, ultimately, that's what I said. Ultimately, the entire humanity constantly searches for peace, happiness, fulfillment, contentment, and so on. So the sooner we realize this cannot be got at the existential level, these are all possible only at a higher level, for which we need to work, we need to discipline ourselves, we need to take to some path, the better off we will be. And I think Sri Ramakrishna has given us a wonderful methodology by which we can proceed, because he clearly teaches it. He says, you tell God that you do not know how to pray. Pray that you do not know how to pray, and you will be shown the way he sees. So if you go through that beautiful book called Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, extraordinary teachings of Sri Ramakrishna, given in a form highly readable in a conversational style, you will clearly understand this idea of devotion, and I'm sure all of us would benefit immensely and open up a spiritual path for all of us in our lives. Thank you very much. Now, just 1 or 2 minutes have exceeded, I think. Brahma Pranaji won't mind, I think. So now you can ask questions. So you take something there. Yeah, 1 second, what is happening in the screen? You just see. Mute my audio. I can ignore now what's happening here. Yeah, please tell me. Now, yeah, question. Sir Prasad.
What I understand from these 3 things that don't have to be followed bad.
Yes, now I've understood. Yeah. See, the point is, yeah. You're correct. You're correct. See, Mr. Prasad says this prayer, worship, and upasana dhyana, are they to be followed after completing one, then second, then third, or can they be combined? They can certainly be combined. But in the initial stages, one has to do much more of prayer. People often think that if we close our eyes, we are meditating. We are not meditating at all. It's a farce or a mockery of meditation. Because unless you know what you are meditating upon, even for japa, the Yoga Sutra says, tad japa, tadartha bhavana. Only if you have artha bhavana, you can even do japa. So, going deeper into meditation or even worship before really doing that intense prayer is like groping in the dark. And also, when the body is more tired, it's much easier to pray. Because quite often we are tired physically and mentally. At that stage, if you try to sit and do dhyana, you'll easily go to sleep. So, although all the 3 can be and should be practiced to some extent, in the initial years, One has to do intensely the idea, the sadhana of prayer, and then slowly you can move forward. Anybody else? Yes?
The rest of what is to offer. So, Swami is use of all the papers and where Swami lies in, does it hinder the view of oneness when you're so attached
Yeah.
to your Isha and maybe
Yes.
excluding a lot of oneness?
Yeah, I've understood. So the next question is, does bhakti, a more deeper involvement in bhakti or the practice of devotion, does it exclude other things? Does it shut out the other avenues available or the other disciplines available? The main thing is, as Ramkrishna himself says, in the initial stages, one should have nishtha, steadfastness. Otherwise, you'll be going here, there, rolling stone gathers no mass, ultimately. So, you'll be only going here and there, not gathering. That's why I often say when people come, oh, here, lecture, please don't go here and there initially. Take something, digest it, absorb it, become established. Then Ramkrishna gives a beautiful example. When the plant is young, it has to be hedged with a fence. But once it has grown into a huge tree, you can tie even elephants. So in the initial stages, whatever is your temperament, whatever that suits you, take that path, explore it fully, practice it intensely. And then once you are fully established, yes, you can go to other parts. Ramakrishna did not do Christianity or Islam or other sadhanas initially. Slowly, as he was fully established, then he branched out just to see what is there, how truth is expressed in other ways and all that. All that he did as he grew in his spiritual life. But apart from that, no yoga is completely independent of other yogas. For example, if you say bhakti, now in bhakti, the intensity, the concentration, the one pointedness, that which you do, that is the Raja Yoga aspect of it, or the Dhyana Yoga aspect of it. With such intensity, such concentration you do, that accounts for, that is the Raja Yoga. What is Jnana Yoga? In Bhakti also, you can't do as you like. You have to really discriminate. What is it that your Ishta would want you to do? What is the most important things to do? It cannot be sentimentalism. It cannot be waywardness. It cannot be go as you like. So there the vichara or the jnana part of it comes there. So that is how Jnana Yoga is embedded in Bhakti Yoga. Karma Yoga, yes, the seva, the kainkariya that you do, the offering, the worship, the service, all that is Karma Yoga. So, in one sense, no yoga is completely independent of other yogas, but to give that name which is predominant. Anyone else? Online, of course, nobody asks. I don't know how many are there online. Oh, Pranaji is very, very particular about time. In India, we just beat about. Yes, Prakash? Yes, yes. Japa and prayer, there's definitely a difference. Japa, prayer, is even kind of more open-ended, where, there is a huge scope for expressing your inner feelings in ever so many ways. Whereas japa is also probably a prayer using mantras, a particular mantra. These mantras are all, if you receive from good traditions, they are all very sacred, handed down by tradition. The Japa is also a prayer, but it's a very restricted prayer done in a particular form. You cannot repeat your japa this way, that way, as you like, as is told to you, as your guru has given, exactly the same way it has to be done. And in japa, that kind of an intense feeling, that kind of intense emotion, pouring out of your heart towards your Ishtadevata, that doesn't happen to that extent. Japa is also powerful. Mother clearly says japa siddhi. Through japa you can attain the highest, because all the mantras, if you say, ultimately they are offerings, offering of prayer, offering of pranam, everything, that's how they're all coined. But in prayer, the intensity, the freedom, the free play of your heart's feelings towards your Ishtadevata or your object of worship, that is not expressed in the same way in japa. There is a difference. Yes, anyone else? Yes. Again, can you repeat? The yajna in modern times, offering our actions at the end of the day, can it be taken as yajna? Yes, why not? That's also worship, that's also offering. That's why I said the yajna can be two types. One is offering physical things, one is offering body and mind. So when you offer the actions that you perform, whatever you did, that's your mental offering. You're mentally offering your actions, whatever you did. That's what Sri Krishna says. Yesterday we talked. Yat karoshi, yadasnasi, yad josi, dadasi, yat tapasyasi kaunteya, tat kurushva madarpanam. Offer everything. The Lord clearly says that's a beautiful way of performing yajna, a very effective way. And in fact, in most traditions, even the japa meditation that you do, at the end of it, you are supposed to offer it to your Ishtadevata. So in modern times, yes, that can be a beautiful substitute for yajna. Anyone else? Or otherwise, Brahma Ji is getting restless for tea break. Okay.